So I'm back in a boring background once again. I'm in one of these nondescript hotels while I'm on my way to an airport tomorrow morning to travel once again. So sorry about the lack of flamingos and pink neon lights, although some of you might prefer that. Maybe a little bit more understated is more your style. So in this episode, I want to talk a little bit about something that comes up a lot, and I'm asked about it a lot online. A lot of messages come to the school about this particular topic, and that's semen retention, which is, a quick look on the internet, on YouTube, a minute ago before I started this, because I don't normally look for such things. But I looked it up, and it turns out I didn't know there was a whole scene around it. It's huge. It seems like there's loads of sort of masculine coaches and stuff like this discussing semen retention, and I couldn't really get through many of them, but I got through a couple of the shorter ones and had a look in it, and it sort of looks from early observations that it's a kind of mix of, the view seems to be they've sort of stolen little bits of Eastern arts, little bits of what maybe started out in yoga or tantra or something, or maybe from Taoist practice, who knows, maybe sort of sexual work from the Taoist texts or whatever. And then they sort of mixed it with this idea of becoming a giga chad. So basically the internet seems to say if you don't ejaculate as a male, then you'll develop lots of testosterone, become attractive to women, and all of your problems in life will be sorted. So it's a little bit of an overstatement, I'll be perfectly honest. But then, of course, there's that mixed in with people who are actually really authentically interested in the internal arts, such as Qi Gong, Gong, or alchemy, or something like this, trying to understand whether this semen retention is real. And I've got people reaching out to me who've done, months and months and months of semen retention, trying to use it to build some kind of spiritual energy or something. And then unfortunately you've got, and it won't work actually, it doesn't work. It works there are certain impacts. What I'm going to do is I'll cover the nature of semen retention in detail from an energetic perspective and what it does, as well as a psychological one, to maybe try to clear up some of the misconceptions. But then also there's the other people who contact us who actually have lots of health problems from doing semen retention. So just as an excess of sexual activity can indeed be bad for you, to not ejaculate can also be incredibly bad for you as well. So these issues can range from psychological disorders, okay, through to what we call Qi deviations, or excess energy running through the spine and up into the head, which lots of people give themselves. Lots and lots of men are suffering with excess Qi or prana or energy running up into their brain, causing migraines and headaches and all kinds of problems. And then the other one, it can lead to excess nocturnal emissions, meaning ejaculating in your sleep, if you don't know what that means, which can actually destroy the kidneys and cause you all kind. Not once, don't worry, if you have nocturnal emission, your kidneys aren't destroyed, but it can become a pattern, so it actually depletes you more than sex did in the first place. Or there's been people who've, when they have ejaculated blood, and all kinds of things like this. So it can cause all kinds of issues if you don't fully understand what semen retention is about. So obviously the perspective I will come at it from is more of a meditative and energetic perspective more than anything else. But first of all, before I look at it, first things, it is real. There are benefits to semen retention, but as with many things, it's not what you do, it's how you do it that is the issue. And I think that most people who do it, from what I can see, are approaching it from very much the wrong perspective. But before I sort of clarify that, the one thing I want to point out first is everything that you do must come from a healthy place, a healthy intent. And I think that often the intent, the mindset behind why people are practicing semen retention is often not right. Now, of course, I'm not saying that for everybody. I'm sure there are people that are fully well versed in the topic, fully read, know exactly what they're doing. Maybe they've been taught to do it and they understand and they're coming from the right place. But there's a lot of people that aren't, because a lot of people have just read something on the internet maybe, or read a book from one of the more unsavory sexually focused Taoist schools, or maybe they've seen a YouTube video from a giga chad telling them how they can attract 1,000 women a day or something like this, and they've sort of taken it upon themselves to try, but actually the intent is wrong, because we should understand that the correct intent to understand semen retention is to understand the way that working with this very potent sexual energy inside the body can influence the mind and influence the energy. So the only real sort of positive mindsets, as far as I can see, is to go into it from a perspective of trying to improve my health, or a perspective of going into it in order to improve the parameters for my meditative or spiritual practice. That's really, as far as I can see, the healthiest intent you can have. Now, the problem is, even if you have that intent of it being for health or it being for spiritual development, if it is coming from a negative place, as in you yourself are in a negative place in your life, then even the intent is going to be sullied, it's going to be sort of distorted. So what I mean by that is, perhaps, my aim is I want to understand my sexual energy and my sexual fluids and learn about semen retention in order to become a spiritual master. But at the same time, the reason I want to do that is because I'm deeply insecure and I've got lots of emotional issues and lots of problems that need dealing with. So actually, what was a good intent now becomes a bad intent because it becomes a form of desperation, like a form of wanting to be saved. And in that way, a good intent becomes a bad one. So I often try to explain to people I'm teaching that if you yourself are not okay before you endeavor to engage in what is essentially quite a heavy practice, then the chances of your intent being correct are slim. And if your intent is not correct, then the outcomes will not be correct, and then you will run risk of causing yourself harm. So I think that talking to a lot of people, there's fear. Fear is the motive, and the fear that they have is that if they ejaculate, especially as a male, ejaculate, I'm talking about men, aren't I? So as a male, if the fear is if I ejaculate, that I'm wasting this potent energy that is going to destroy my health and destroy my potential for achieving something higher with myself. Now, already that's an unhealthy mindset to come from, because if it's based in fear, that's not any good for you. The other thing that I think that a lot of people go into semen retention for is actually, I think, because they know they've burnt it up, because I think it often goes hand in hand with porn addiction from a very young age. Now, I don't want to just discuss porn addiction particularly. As much as anything, I've already done a podcast on my views on it previously. But one thing I will say is I think that most young men who grew up with the internet, so what does that make them? I don't know, sort of 30 and younger? Maybe, something like that. I don't know. I'm not very good at that. But around that age, most of the men that I see of around that age have actually struggled with a porn addiction from a very, very young age. A lot of them access pornography very, very young, especially because of the internet and how easy it is to get. That a lot of them have been living with addiction for a long time. So consequently, there's a huge amount of issues there. So maybe they have burnt out their kidneys from a lot of sexual activity. And I don't want to go into too much of it because, like I say, it's repeating another podcast. But I'm surprised by the amount of young males who have kidney issues these days. So I think often they detect this and they know this, and then they get into these arts and then they start to practice, and then it just feels weak. The back feels weak, the legs feel weak, and there's no energy there, and they look unhealthy. And if you're suffering health issues in your early 30s, when you should be veritably superhuman with regards to the amount of energy running through your body compared to someone like me in my mid-40s, but I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing men that don't have much virility because they've already kind of burnt all that energy out, all that essence is gone. So I think in their defense, I think there's men that are coming into these arts and recognizing this and then trying to use semen retention to fix the issue. Now, it will do some things, fair enough, but the root of it, as much as anything, is the addiction needs to be dealt with first. You can't swing from one position to another. You can't swing from extreme addiction to sexual activity to suddenly ceasing all sexual activity, because there's a whole, go away and look up the psychology of addiction. There's a whole process of mental repair, if you like, the psychological repairing that has to be done in order to get you back to a central place that then you can then work on these ideas of maybe looking at semen retention as a practice. The other side of it as well is a lot of addiction is to do with emotion regulation. I mean, a lot of people are so stressed and irate, and also I think their social media has created such a level of ADHD within them that they can't regulate their emotions anyway. They have no idea how to do it. So it's just this excess energy that's going around inside their body, stressing them out all the time. The amount of anxiety and antipsychotic medications everybody is on. It's no wonder people are a bit confused at the moment about many things. So what happens is if you have that level of heightened emotional energy, then what happens is your addictive behavior, such as porn addiction, becomes a form of emotional regulation. Because often when you're engaged, especially in sexual activity, isn't it? The sexual activity often switches off all negative emotions. It's like, there's a reason why sex and meditation, in my opinion incorrectly, but kind of got put together within some traditions, because during the point of pre-orgasm and orgasm, there's often a silencing of the mind and then a focusing to a single point. So it's the closest people often experience at that point of orgasm to a sort of emotionless, thoughtless state. And people might say sex is not emotionless, but actually I think it's like a rapturous energy. I mean, sort of the lower emotions are ended at that point, are they? You're not sort of worried or fearful or any of these things. You're focused into something else. So I think on a lesser scale, people use sex and sex addiction for this. I mean, I think that most people who are emotionally regulated and emotionally centered and emotionally balanced and can process their emotions well, I often think they don't really have much in the way of addictions. They don't need to turn to something to regulate their emotions, and therefore sex addiction tends to go away as well. So I think that emotional regulation needs to be looked at first, and I'll tell you why. Because say you're using pornography to or sex with another person, but usually it's pornography, isn't it? Especially as we see, statistically declining numbers in sexual activity amongst young people these days, which you can find figures for that online. They're quite bizarre actually. But if you look at the sort of excess sexual activity that people are engaging in pornography in order to regulate their heightened emotions, so it becomes a sort of stress response. What that means is if you then try to switch to semen retention, what you're actually doing is you're retaining semen in a state of still being stressed. So your nervous system is still on. Think of your nervous system as being strained like the strings of a guitar, tightly tuned, and previously you had excess sexual activity using Pornhub or whatever to regulate that emotional activity, but now you don't. So instead all you're doing is you build up all this energy in the body in a stress state, and all it does is it heightens all of that stress and all that emotions. So it starts to make you move into a bit more into fight or flight. And for a lot of people, they mistake that with suddenly becoming more macho, isn't it? It's like, I've retained my semen, now I'm more of a man because I've got all of this extra testosterone. Look at me walking around like some kind of primal beast. But actually what's going on is they're just moving into more of a stressed state. And if they continue to do this, then a lot of people, it can heighten the emotions, and because they don't have anywhere to go, then it can actually lead to psychological issues. And in many cases this is common. People are actually having full-on nervous breakdowns. And if you have all this nervous energy, and then maybe you're someone who has a leaning towards the movement of qi within the body, then that's the root of where your qi deviations come from. So that's not to say that the semen retention itself is the thing that is causing the emotional issue. What I'm saying is you had an activity, porn addiction, that you were using to emotionally regulate your nervous system, and you took that away, okay, because you wanted to do semen retention, but you hadn't regulated your emotions. So instead, your nervous system is still fired up, and without that regulatory technique gone, then all the energy just files into it, and then that's where you get problems. Especially if you start combining that with strange practices such as perineum squeezing and all this kind of stuff, which is always a bad idea because it's not a basic technique. Is because what it will do is it will just push all that energy straight up the spine into the brain. So then you will get the root for qi deviations. And I would say one of the most common reasons for qi deviations that we're seeing is restriction of sexual activity to a large degree, so that you're making yourself more frustrated, building more anxious energy, and then using the perineum squeezing to send all that anxious energy up into your brain. And the result is you overfry the system. It's like putting too much electricity through a circuitry that's very resistant because of your emotions, and the result is you overheat and then you start to get problems. So that being said, what I just want to highlight is, I guess just to summarize myself, is prior to engaging anything like semen retention, you need to be okay yourself. So you need to check, are you doing this for the right reasons? Is it coming from a place of fear or a place of anxiety, or are you unable to regulate yourself emotionally? Because this all becomes very important to the act of retaining the semen. So let's jump across to the practicalities of it. Now, from a Chinese medical perspective, it is true that excess sexual activity, especially in the case of males, men and women have different issues from the act of sex. Women are affected differently, and this is very much a podcast for males, because I'm looking at it from their perspective. But the issue with men is that the ejaculation causes a loss of what we call the jing, the essence. Okay, Now, at the same time, it's actually not just ejaculation, it's sexual arousal too. So if you look at it this way, a little bit of sexual arousal, or full sexual arousal, if you like, will actually start to burn up some of the energy or cause it to move in a way that's already taking it away from spiritual practice. And then the ejaculation itself takes it further by actually, causing a substance to come out of the body. This is true, but at the same time, your body is able to produce enough sexual energy and enough sexual fluid over the course of a day that it's actually normal and natural for your body to ejaculate as a male. And obviously that amount changes as you get older. So an 18-year-old male, for example, is able to ejaculate a lot more often, possibly once a day, without feeling any huge detrimental effects to his physical health. Whereas someone of my age in their mid-40s should probably only be a couple of times a week at the most, maybe 3 times if you're particularly strong. In your 50s, that should go down, and so on and so on. So that number should drop. And if you go in Chinese medicine classics, you will see these numbers listed. And actually, they're very sparing with their numbers, but those numbers are referring to somebody who is frail or unhealthy. So, for example, they may say somebody at my age in their 40s should only ejaculate once a month or something if they're trying to preserve this essence, whereas somebody of my age who has a fair degree of strength should be able to do it more often. Now, realistically, I think those numbers are so different from person to person that there's an easy way to tell. If after ejaculation, as a male, that you feel your back is achy and weak and your legs are not as strong, I mean, it was what Muhammad Ali talked about, wasn't it? Muhammad Ali was famous for not having sex for a couple of days before his boxing match because he said it made his legs weak, which is accurate. Post-orgasm, if there is a depletion of Jing beyond what is healthy for you, then your lower back and your knees and your legs will start to feel weak. Often, it's a stereotype of men having sex, isn't it? That after sex, then the woman wants to talk and the man wants to roll over and fall asleep. Now, if the male immediately wants to fall asleep, well, if a male wants to fall asleep because they're relaxed after having sex, that's fine. But if a male needs to go to sleep straight after sex because they're wiped out and exhausted and tired and they can't stay awake, that is an excess depletion of Jing. So with regards to your personal amount, from a non-practitioner perspective, just health, that's how you know. If after you have ejaculated as a male, if your back feels weak and your legs feel weak, or you have something like tinnitus, a buzzing in the ear, or you feel stiff and bruised in the back, or you have to fall asleep afterwards, then most likely you're doing too much. You are basically releasing the energy through sex quicker than your body can actually rebuild it or restore it. And this Jing actually comes from a combination of, they say your kidneys in Chinese medicine, but also a particular fluid that comes down from the top of the body containing hormonal energies within esoteric teachings that gather within the perineum or the base of the body that forms your Jing. Okay, so your body is producing that, and if you use it up faster than your body can produce, then you will get those negative symptoms. So if you understand that, you can already kind of look to see what your natural level is. How fast can you produce the energy for sexual activity? Now, at the same time, sexual activity with a partner, someone of the opposite sex, will nourish the body. It's a little bit more complicated for homosexuality, and I'm aware that I'm sort of staying with a very mainstream conventional form of relationship, I guess, aren't I? I'm looking at the perspective of males and then heterosexual males, I guess, just to keep things simple so the podcast doesn't end up massively long. But in the case of sex with a partner, for example, sex with a woman from the perspective of being a male, because of the energy that is nourished back into your body from the woman, there's actually much less energy lost when you're having sex with a woman than if you are masturbating. And so there is a huge difference in that as well. But still, it's possible to overburn out through sex with a partner. But masturbation is far more detrimental. Masturbation with pornography would be worse once again, because not only that is there's all kind of psychological bonding that's going on with an image of somebody that's just not there. There's so many complications with regards to negative impacts upon your psychological health of pornography that I advocate for all spiritual practitioners or energy workers to end pornography within their life straight away whatsoever it should go. So once you've learned essentially what is your regular level of sexual activity as a male, then we need to understand a little bit about why would you want to retain the semen beyond a healthy level. Do you know what I mean? So once you learn, maybe, okay, I can have I can ejaculate twice a week and I'm fine. So once you've discovered you can ejaculate twice a week and you're fine, why would you then want to restrict it further? That is the question to look at. Now, I would say before you answer that question, you should probably find what is normal for you first. So you can't jump straight from excess sexual activity, masturbating to pornography 5 times a day or something like this, in a form to emotionally regulate yourself, all of a sudden jumping to semen retention and never having sex and becoming celibate or something like this straight away. You can't jump from A to Z. You have to find something in the middle. So you have to find normal regulation level of sexual activity first. That's first. So before you even attempt any semen retention or nofap or becoming celibate or any of those things, before you attempt any of those, you have to find what is normal. What is your normal level of sexual activity that your body can handle? Because there is something that comes from learning from your body, learning from within, what is the normal cycle and what is the normal level of energy that I have. And you learn so much about yourself if you understand your inner capabilities, your inner capacities, and your inner cycles. And once you've acknowledged and recognized what that is for you, then of course maybe it's a little weak, so maybe it's not very much. Maybe as you practice that way for a little while, living within your capabilities, you will find your capabilities grow a little bit, and you will find a level of normality for your body. So normality must come first. Normality is the baseline for any advanced or complicated practice. Anyone I've ever known who's ever had problems from energetic practice, with the exception of 1 or 2 that were doing a strange practice that was clearly dangerous, they were generally people that had some level of abnormality first. They were already psychologically not good. They were already very stressed. They were already very anxious. They were already in a state of chronic and constant fight or flight. And the result of being in that state meant that they weren't normal from the start. They weren't at the start of the race, and then they tried to run it, and then the result was their body got damaged. And this is the same with something like semen retention. You must begin from normal first. Now, the energetics of sex, okay, not the science of sex. Let's just go to the esoteric energetics. There's probably loads of people online. I expect that I've not seen it, but I expect Huberman's done something on it, hasn't he? And there's probably other people done something on the sort of chemical nature of sex, I'm sure. That's bound to be there. So I will talk about it from an energetic perspective. Now, one thing that's known, sorry, there's a little bit of info on this, isn't there? It's going to be, I'll try to keep it short, but I think it's useful to know all the info. There's an aspect of sex where sex and meditation or spiritual practice have become integrated, haven't they? Now, I'm not pro it, actually, because I think that sexual practice, I think there's many confusions around it. And just because something's written in a fairly old text, that doesn't make it accurate. Sometimes texts are preserved because they're titillating or interesting, and I think a lot of the Taoist sexual practice books especially suffer from that. So I think even within what we consider the classics, there are errors with regards to sex. But it's still a part of it. I mean, there's lots of people engaging in tantric sex or energetic sex or the alchemical sex or whatever. The other reason I think it's an error as well is because I think most people are oversexed. And I think that if you have something that's potent energetically like sex, but you live in a society in a time where it's not a major part of your existence, it still kind of has that potency. Whereas if you're living in a society where everything is hypersexualized, and maybe you've been engaging in pornography since you were, 12 years old or whatever is normal these days, and you've been watching it all the time on your phone and on your laptop and your iPad or whatever like that, and you're hypersexualized anyway, and then you're watching TV, Game of Thrones, where there's someone being sexually assaulted every 5 minutes, or movies, or you walk out in the town, middle of Times Squares, billboards of women in lingerie or whatever, you're living in a hypersexualized time. Now, if you think about what happens if you're constantly given something like this, it loses its potency, it loses its power. I mean, if you want to think of it like this, if you can remember back to when you were younger, the first time you engaged in sexual activity or the first time you engaged in sex, it was a highly sort of psychologically powerful thing and an energetic thing, and the level of sensation in your body was unbelievable. It was mind-blowing when you were younger, which is, that combined with all the hormones in your body makes it a focal point for your mind for a long time, an obsession. But as you get older and you're oversaturated with sexual activity and you've had sex many times, actually you can have sex. Maybe you meet someone new and have sex with them. It doesn't have that same power. It doesn't have that anymore. In the same way as we talk about first love being really powerful, and then by your time you're on your fifth love, it's not quite so strong. You've been overexposed to it, and your body will normalize something, and it will regulate a state so that it no longer has such a same sort of potency or power. So I think if you live in a society where you're constantly exposed to these kind of things, then essentially the potency or power of it is removed. Therefore, even the energetics of what you can do with it is weakened. Whereas if you compare this to several hundred years ago, whereas I know that these days people like to paint old, sort of Chinese or Indian cultures of these sexually open places. They weren't. That's bollocks. That's an absolute nonsense lie. Definitely, if you walk down into the town, there wasn't billboards of women lingerie, there wasn't pornography everywhere. There was a lot more of a conservative view towards sex, and even to what women could expose on their body skin-wise, which I'm not advocating for either way. I'm not telling women to go put burqas on, but I'm just saying that as a fact, women will now show more skin than they used to. And I think that, you only have to look at films, black and white movies, not even that long ago, the sort of sexual innocence within the way they approach life compared to now. If you see a TV program like Skins when I was younger, which is an old TV show now, or I've not seen it, but I think there's something called Euphoria. I've not seen it, but that is a hyper-sexualized program that young people watch. I could be wrong on that, but if I've got that wrong, I apologize. But the hypersaturation you have of it like this means that, once again, it doesn't have the same potency. So therefore, sexual practice loses its power. So and a lot of Tantra is based on this, right? Learning to, and I'm sure Tantrics might disagree with me, and it's not my area, so I apologize. But the same with many of the alchemical things. It's engaging in things that have a kind of potent energy behind it. And it was why you had lots of sort of counterculture things that old esoteric people would do, things that were a little bit crazy. They would do sort of what people would consider abhorrent acts, okay, that wasn't societally accepted because there was an energy behind it. The taboo of it contained a kind of energy, just like sex did, which it doesn't really anymore. If you live in a highly sexually open society, that taboo energy, if you like, is not there anymore. So that's why I'm not an advocate for that kind of practice in order to assist you. But if you're going to engage in it, because I know many people are fascinated for it, I've probably made my view clear, then you should understand that basically your essence, jumping back to a Chinese perspective, okay, your essence essentially, your jing contains a couple of components. Basically, in males, when the sexual fluid is formed, then obviously the sperm are contained with this. So you have the energy of the potential for life in your sexual fluids. Each one of those little specks of energy, or those little sperms, every single one of those has the potential to produce another human being, especially when obviously combined with the woman's energy, okay? So when the egg is fertilized, now there is enough qi within that to produce a human being. That's a huge amount of energy. That's a spark of pure yang energy to produce another life. And then, of course, while the woman is pregnant, she is feeding that life with her own energy, and the energy to nourish it for 9 months to create another human being. But still, there had to be a massive explosion of energy to even create another human life. The same spark that's in you, the spark of life that created you, is within your essence. Now, if you think about how much essence you produce, which is lessening as generations go on, obviously, but every one of your sperm contains that energy, and that energy is coming from within you. In Chinese medicine, sometimes they say stored in the kidneys, and a lot of alchemical traditions, they say produced in the marrow of the brain, and it runs down through the body, which is what I agree with, through the insides to gather at the bottom. They say the water runs downwards to gather at the base of the body. Now, this energy that goes into the bottom of the body, into the essence, then starts to power up and produce desire. Okay, it's like all this energy burning away at the bottom of the body like a fire, and this energy then creates arousal. Now, this arousal then causes you to have sex or ejaculate, which then sends that energy out to either potentially produce a new life or not, depending on what you do with it. Obviously not through masturbation. So what energetic practitioners were trying to do, before we look at spiritual practitioners, energetic practitioners were recognizing that the body is producing this energy that is not used by us. It is sent down to the bottom of the body to produce a new life. But they were learning there is a way to extract that energy out of the essence and pull it back into the body. So you are essentially nourished with this energy repeatedly throughout your life and throughout your practice. So a lot of the art of longevity or maintaining good health, which is more important than living age, isn't it? Living healthily for that time. A lot of this, or a lot of the filling of the body and the opening of the channels, was based on learning to take the essence and then extract that life energy out, what they call chun yang, pure yang, out of the essence, extracting the middle line from the trigrammatic symbol, if you like, in alchemy, and pulling it out, so that instead of it producing a new life, it went back into your system. So you are literally nourishing yourself with the energy that would go on to produce a fetus or a baby, you know. Now to do that is not natural for the body. It's hard to extract that energy out of the sexual fluids. So therefore they come up with mechanisms to do it. So a lot of the writings in alchemy on an energetic level about establishing a cauldron and a furnace at the base of the body was about creating enough of a qi field to create a kind of magnet that it extracts the yang energy out of the sexual fluids so that you can nourish the body with it. So on this level, from an energetic perspective, what they would do is start to reduce the level of sexual activity eventually to the level of almost celibacy. In the case of the Taoists, they would reduce it a lot so that your body had a storehouse of this yang energy so they could extract it and send it into the system to create qi. This is the part of the Jing to qi mechanism, not the whole thing, but part of it. Now, in order for that to happen, you also had to understand that what moves that yang energy is not just ejaculation, but sexual arousal. So essentially, the practitioners of this from alchemy would also have to settle the heart-mind to such a point that energy wasn't stirred into practice, stirred into movement by your arousal in the first place. This is why what they call the heart-mind had to grow still. So in the case of semen retention with regards to energetics, in order for it to be healthy, there is also regulation of the mind and the emotions alongside the storing of the energy. But you must then have a method to extract the energy from the sexual fluid. Most people don't have a method to do it because it's not based on squeezing your perineum. And when I looked around at the writings on Taoist approach to semen retention, I saw no accurate methods. None. And I saw many inaccurate ones of how to extract that energy to move it back into the marrow and into the brain, but none of them are correct because it's not done with visualization, it's not done with intent, it's not done with squeezing your perineum, it's not done with any of those things people are doing. Now, that doesn't mean on the dark corners of the interweb somewhere there isn't an accurate method, but I didn't see any. Now, I personally think that the method should be taught individually, not shared on a YouTube video or anything like this, because if the heart-mind is not settled, you are still very irate, you're still very emotional, you still got all these kind of inadequacy or feelings of inadequacy, whether accurate or not, who knows, feelings of inadequacy in yourself and all these kind of things, and you're still very much in fight or flight, and then you try to extract that energy, all you're going to do is push yourself further and further into fight or flight until you become essentially massively psychologically overloaded. You'll become stressed as hell, because that if you know the extraction technique, you're pulling the pure yang into that system and you'll burn out. And this is what some people may have accidentally done. Maybe they stumbled across a method and fucked themselves up through this kind of technique. So what I'm implying is, if you're going to retain the semen and become celibate, you will build up energy, but you won't really benefit from it because you can't extract it. You don't have the extraction method. So therefore, what's going to happen is it's going to build up, and then eventually it's going to turn into crazy amounts of desire. That's one option. Or it will be a nocturnal emission, as in your body wants rid of it because you don't have a way to extract it. Or your body will actually default into switching off your sexual desire altogether because it doesn't want to deal with that constant buildup of energy. So you'll cause yourself all kinds of sexual issues. Now, when you see people online talking about, no, when they retain semen, they feel good. Yeah, they do, but they're only talking for a short space of time. These guys are doing sort of 28 to 30 days, which to me is no big deal. Like, if you want to do a month of no ejaculation, then whatever. Okay, I don't even consider that being semen retention. That's called taking a month off. You want to take 2 months off. If that's called taking 2 months off, that's no big deal. I'm talking about longer levels of retaining the semen. And most of the benefits that these guys are getting, from what I can see, of doing their 30 or 60, or if they're a real hero, 90 days. Giga Chad does 90 days. I don't know. Well, it's 3 months off. Who cares? 3 months is a blip in the grand scheme of your life. But most of the benefits they're getting is simply because they are already deficient people. They were already deficient. They were already burning themselves out. They were already emotionally regulating through sexual activity. So they were already overusing their essence. So when they take their 30, 60 or 90 days and then they suddenly feel good, it's because they're actually doing what I said, which is finding normality. That's it. They're finding the baseline and they're suddenly realizing they feel a lot healthier. Now, they're not amazingly healthy because they've retained all this essence. They're amazingly healthy compared to being depleted like they were before. That's it. If you compare sick to healthy, healthy can feel superhuman. So I think that practically from an energetic perspective, that amount of semen retention, taking a month or 2 or whatever, and letting it, taking a break from it, fine. No problem at all. Anything longer than that is when it's going to start to become problematic. And even then, more useful than taking a solid month or 2 off is learning to find normality instead. I think it's a lot healthier for you because you'll learn to sustain your body in the right state. Now, that's energetics of it. That's energetics of it. And fair enough. There's another side to it, which is the meditative side of it, of course, because energy work and meditation obviously go hand in hand, but there also are separate components to it, and different traditions would focus on it in different ways. So the meditative perspective of it is that essentially in any meditation, certainly at the beginning, what you have is a kind of crutch, something to support you. And this thing that supports you is something that you use to quieten the mind. So some traditions will use the breath. Some traditions will use an object that they're generating as a point of focus, or something that they'll focus on an object when they, probably not a water bottle, but maybe a candle or something like that. I don't know, they'll concentrate on something when they, or an image, a picture, a symbol. So part of the reason they're using this is as a crutch in order to focus all of their thoughts to one point so that essentially the rest of the mind can grow quiet. Now, within some traditions, tantric, energetic, alchemical, one of the things they used as a crutch was the energy. Okay, and even crutch is a bit of a shit word, actually. It makes it sound like it's like trainer wheels on a bike that you take off after a while. But actually, the crutch is often used. So if you hear people talk about a meditation object, that is the crutch. The object is the crutch that you're using to meditate on until the mind goes quiet, which will lead you through to jhana, essentially to meditative state. So a crutch is a dodgy word because you can actually use it for your entire meditation career, if you like, until a very, very late in stage in practice. So me, for example, the crutch that I will use will often just be my body. So I might even use it at the start of a meditation sit. So when I say, I'll spend a couple of hours sat here. I did 3.5 hours today, and I sat at the beginning, and I was going to be sat there for 3.5 hours. So the first thing I did was just settle, and I'll use my body as a crutch, meaning an object that I allowed my mind to filter into. And that probably lasted, I don't know, I wasn't timing it, but let's say 15, 20 minutes. 15, 20 minutes, because I'm slow. Settling into the body as a crutch, meaning that I have an object for my mind to stabilize into. And then increasingly I fall back from that place and then enter into a meditative state. That's what you train. And obviously different traditions will have different takes on it, but that would be a sort of basic way to use the mind into an object until the mind unifies with itself to enter into a meditative state, right? And again, oversimplification of meditation there. Don't take that as instructions of the entire system, but the kind of basis of the idea of an object. Now, different in magical traditions, yeah? They'll talk about objects as something else. I'm talking about a pure meditation object, right? Now, one of the most powerful objects somebody can use is their energy, their Qi. Okay, one of the most powerful things, if you have any. So, for example, in Qi Gong, or Qi Gong practice, or alchemy, the building of a large amount of energy within the body so that your body radiates this substance that is not natural for humans to have means that you have a almost overwhelming object or overwhelming crutch for your awareness. So when you go inside, if the body is radiant with Qi, your awareness gets absorbed into the Qi, and that leads you into a meditative state. And this is the part of the reason why Qi Gong was a precursor to spiritual practice. or many other spiritual traditions had energetic components to it, such as yoga, for example. A huge amount of yogic traditions had energetic work prior to union with the divine, and part of the reason was they were building this overwhelming energy that, as well as opening channels and purifying the body and all that kind of stuff, formed such a powerful and all-consuming crutch object that your mind got absorbed into it, so the energy then becomes a vehicle for your meditative state, right? Now, the reason I'm talking about that, and this is very important, if you build a lot of energy effectively whilst quieting the heart mind, whilst not being in a stressed fight or flight state, your meditation becomes very, very good, because it becomes like a magnet that draws the mind in. If, however, you build loads of energy while you're still in a fight or flight state, still very wired, does the opposite. Because what happens when you're very stressed and you build a lot of energy is it will make more and more stress and push you out of a meditative state. Okay? That's very important. Maybe I'll say that again. I do rush and talk very fast. If you're building a lot of energy, but you're very calm, out of fight or flight, when you build that energy, you will get absorbed into it, and it will become a vehicle to lead you towards jhana. If you're very stressed, very anxious, still very fight or flight, and you build a lot of energy, actually the energy will, instead of becoming a crutch, will heighten your stress state and throw you out of meditation. So now it will make your meditation worse. And on top of that, it will also make you more stressed and more anxious and cause you all kinds of emotional problems. So energy work must always be combined with the silencing of the heart mind. Okay? Now, the reason I'm talking about energy, because this is where the idea of sexual practice came in with regards to meditation. Because the recognition was that, especially in males, prior to ejaculation, there was a large buildup of energy in your body, okay, of essence, that pure yang into your system, that prior to ejaculation, your mind could very easily absorb into. So if you think to an orgasm, maybe a particularly strong orgasm that you had as a male, there's normally a build-up, isn't there, where you feel it sort of building up in your body. Then there is a release of energy, which often isn't very long, and you're all absorbed into it, and then there is ejaculation, which is a release, and then it ends. And then often what happens is after the ejaculation, especially if you're still using sex to regulate your emotions, then your emotions will come back with a vengeance, and this is why you get feelings of guilt and remorse and upset and anger. A lot of people feel depressed after sex, and it's not really the sex. They'll push it onto that, saying, oh, it must be because sex is a sin or something, but often it's because they've been hyper-regulating their emotions with sexual activity, so that when they ejaculate, here comes that emotional energy back with a vengeance to create all that sort of negative feeling. So anyway, jumping around a bit, going back to orgasm in males. So what I say, you have the build up, and then a release of energy into your body, okay? Then ejaculation, and it's over. Now, for most people, that build up of energy that absorbs your mind in is 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. It's not very much. With women, a little bit longer. Often it can be longer, and they can remain within that state for a longer period of time. And especially when a woman talks about having a very strong orgasm, what she often means is the period of energy prior to the release has lasted a long time, and sometimes women will naturally stay in that state. And then a woman in that orgasmic state will get lost inside it, so that they lose full control of the body and full control. They're experiencing a full absorption of the awareness into the energy. Now for men, that's only a second or two usually. So a lot of the time within the sort of sexual practices, what they were trying to do, and this is where the confusion comes from, was they wanted to extend the energy before the ejaculation, but then not have the ejaculation. That was really the basis of it, so that you're extending that time out and then taking away the full stop that ends that experience, so that the tantric practitioner or the sexual meditator could then absorb their mind more into that period prior to ejaculation that was a lot longer, okay? So when they write about this, what they say is, don't ejaculate. Okay, so then what happens is people mistake that for, if I don't ejaculate, then it will be good for me spiritually. But you don't understand. It's not that you don't ejaculate, it's that you extend the energy prior to the meditation, to the ejaculation first, and absorb into this, and then you learn to control the body so that there's no ejaculation for a longer period, so that it doesn't end. And then skilled practitioners could go into it for a few minutes, and then 20 minutes, and half an hour, and extend it for a really long time, which is why you get especially Indian writers talking about the orgasmic bliss and connecting it to sexual practices. Now, if you understand this, then you can see that actually to simply not ejaculate is not the same thing, okay? It's not the same thing. So I've talked about it from two different traditions. Energetic. Energetic is you build up that essence and then you learn how to extract the energy from it to take it into your body so it builds energy, okay? So therefore, if you don't ejaculate but you don't know the extraction method, then the energetic version won't work for you. If you don't know the extraction method, then building up all that energy at the bottom is not really going to do a lot for you, okay? With regards to the meditative, the idea was to build up that energy too and then allow it to move through your body for longer periods without ejaculating. Now, in the meditative tradition, some people will stop ejaculating or just hold it in or do something like that. But they didn't learn how to extend the energy before the ejaculation, so therefore it served no purpose either. To simply have sex and not ejaculate isn't doing anything. If the energetic period of orgasm prior to ejaculation is not opening up and extending, then again the semen retention is not really doing anything. So again, wasted, okay, waste of whatever, waste of opportunity. Now, in the meditative tradition, in order to extend that energy, you also need to have an incredibly settled heart mind and a very high level of stability of awareness, because it is the awareness absorbing into that state that enables it to open up. And most people simply don't have the level of meditative or concentrative skill to be able to do that. So therefore, the semen retention won't even help them in that practice either. And I think the other issue with sexual practice, like I said at the beginning, is if you're already very distorted inside your mind, very fight or flight, very emotionally regulative through your activity, through addicted, distorted ideas to it, if you have all of that, and then you retain the semen, actually, instead of getting that extension of that window of absorption, what you actually get a backlash of energy back into the body, and it creates all kinds of further psychological distortions. Which is why the most messed up people I ever get that come into the school are people that have come from schools that are very focused on sexual energy. Okay, always the same. The ones that have tried to do semen retention for sexual energy always have the biggest fuck-ups inside the head, the biggest fuck-ups in the mind, biggest damage to the nervous system, most fried nervous systems, biggest blockages inside their body, because they don't know the skill of learning to do it. So whatever direction you're looking at semen retention from, the energetic traditions or they're both energetic, aren't they? I should say the alchemical traditions of building Qi, or the more meditative traditions, shall I say, of using the sexual energy prior to ejaculation to absorb into. If you don't have a huge amount of prerequisite skill, then both of them become useless to you anyway, to be perfectly honest. So therefore, the semen retention is not helping you. So, now I've trashed both of those in my usual negative fashion, sorry about that. Why are people getting health benefits from the semen retention? Because of course there's millions of videos out there of people going, they're getting great benefits. As I said before, they're getting benefits because they're moving from unhealthy to healthy. They're moving from unnatural with their sexuality to normal. And this is kind of what's happening, is what they're talking about: increased energy, sharper mind, more confidence, higher virility, all these kind of things that you see these guys talking about. That's normal. That's what is normal for a human being. That's not, you understand that if this is normal, that's not developing energetic skill, that's not developing spiritual skill. That's coming from being decrepit to normal. They're finding baseline, and they're talking about baseline because normal baseline is so rare for people. They talk about it like it's a superpower. So I guess there's nothing wrong with that, but you do realize that that level of normality can be found with a shorter break from sexual activity of 30 days if you really want to. Like take a full lunar cycle of 28 days and refrain not only from orgasm or ejaculation, but also from sexual stimulation as well. That's very important. You have to have the lot. If you can refrain from it, then what will happen is naturally your body will take a break from something that is very, very draining, and it's like resting. You suddenly become normal, and then you will realize all of these benefits that they're talking about. I'm pro that, providing that you have, a decent level of centeredness, and you're not so stressed and anxious that sex is a kind of psychologically, emotionally regulating tool. If you don't have all of those things, then to simply refrain from it for a month should be very easy and actually makes you feel fine. But that doesn't mean that you continue with that activity, it will continue to get better, because it won't. Your body will get to a stage where it can't sustain that buildup of energy, so it will do one of the three things I said, which it'll either increased masses of desire, okay, you'll get a sudden increase of energy in an unhealthy way, or you will get nocturnal emissions because your body will want to shed it, or for some reason some people's body will just switch off and then sexual desire will be gone altogether, and you can create erectile dysfunction, all kind of things, just because you've sort of it's that whole thing, if you don't use it or lose it, isn't that the phrase or something? So this is why I advocate for, and this is where the questions have come up, why am I advocating for normality with regards to your sexual activity? And my version of normality is that you need to figure out what is the natural level for your body to want to engage in sexual activity without depleting yourself, without hurting the back, hurting the knees, tinnitus, making you tired. And to a normal means you are not using your sexual activity to regulate emotional stress, which is what a lot of people are doing. So that's semen retention. So how often should you do it? If you're doing a 30-day or 28-day or whatever, refraining from it, I would say that, I don't know, a couple of times a year or something like that. I mean, if you find a normal level of sexual activity that's healthy for your body, meaning that your body can produce the energy that it requires, enough that it can create healthy sexual activity without taxing the rest of the body. I mean, it's like when you watch these sci-fi programs like Star Trek and stuff like that, or maybe some others, but you know, Star Trek always used to be on late on. Why was that? I used to go out drinking as a teenager and I'd come back late at night on a Friday and Star Trek would be on. Why the fuck are people watching Star Trek late at night on a, you know, we're talking 1 a.m. or midnight on a Friday or Saturday. Maybe it was a Sky TV thing. I don't know, prior to streaming services. Who knows the weird times. Anyway, I always remember being off my face on something or very, very drunk and coming home and Star Trek would be on. Sort of sat there in a drunken haze watching aliens in bad sets, TV sets. But they would always, something goes wrong and they redirect energy from somewhere. That's what I was talking about. So they take a hit from a missile or something like that, a photon torpedo, and a part of the ship is breaking down. So they'll redirect energy from shields or redirect energy from thrusters so that this energetic system can function better. And of course, the rest of the ship is running on lower energy. It's only the same with your body. That's what I was talking about, Star Trek. So that's, don't know why I jumped to wondering why it was on in the early hours of the morning. But that's only is what happens when it goes on with your body. So if I am having too much sexual activity for the amount of energy that the body is producing within the brain or within the adrenals or kidneys, then what will happen is when I have that sexual activity, it will draw from other parts of my system. So therefore other parts of my body will start to become weak, such as my muscular system and my nervous system, my hormonal system will just start to become depleted because you're redirecting energies towards forward shields. So finding that normality is good, because if I can find the normal level so that my body can recuperate what I'm losing, then your sexual activity doesn't become detrimental for your practice anyway. It's no longer detrimental for Qi Gong. It's no longer detrimental for spiritual practice. And often what will happen is you will naturally develop a healthier association with it anyway. All of the negative mental associations you probably picked up from pornography or depraved depictions on TV and movies will start to naturally shed, and you'll find that it will develop a more loving and connective attachments to that sexual energy. Will be a lot better for you and your partner or future partners or whatever in the long run anyway, and also won't deplete the body, so that you can then have a normal regulated sex life alongside your energy work or your spiritual practice. Okay, then the final stage is what will start to happen is at certain levels, as you go deeper into your meditation and energy work, if you're very good and you've done it a very long time, energy work is like this. The energy work field, the Qi Gong field, it takes a long time to master your energy, many, many years. You know, I remember starting as a teenager, I couldn't do it at all, couldn't regulate it, energy all over, just a mess. It took years and years and years in order to learn how to build and circulate and develop this energy to a high level. Nowadays on YouTube, there's like, you can find 1,000 20-year-olds who all claim to have mastered energy, and I watch them doing their energy tricks on YouTube, and I hate to see it. I know some of you watch these videos, but I watch you doing your empty force and your things like this, and you just look depleted. I'm really sorry, but you haven't mastered energy. So some of what's happening is sometimes people are learning to mobilize their energy, but they don't know how to build it. So all these guys in their 20s who think they're energy masters, by the time you're 30, you're going to be fucked. By the time you're 40, you're going to be burnt out and look like that guy from Tales from the Crypt Keeper. It ain't doing you any good. You haven't mastered energy. You have learned how to use it up. And at the moment, you're getting away with it in your 20s because you've got an abundance of it, but it ain't going to last, because you need to recognize that it takes a long time to train your body to do these things healthily. And that was a warning, because I love you guys and I don't want you to burn yourselves out and look like little skinny stick things. So what will happen anyway is as you go deeper and deeper in, and you've trained for a long time, you're not in your early 20s, and you learn how to regulate your mind and your heart mind and your chi to a higher level, you will naturally go inside, and then there will be a settling that will start to lead to a change in the way that that energy develops, and you will be led to a state of cessation of sexual activity. It is a natural byproduct that arises not from low testosterone or anything like that, but it naturally arises because you go inside and the mind grows so still that the jing settles, and then sexual activity actually goes still. And you will get into a state that if there is, well, if you're heterosexual, of course, I forget now that, you know, there's a whole spectrum of things. I'm only talking from my perspective. From a heterosexual perspective, if there is not a woman there that is causing you to be aroused in person, which will stimulate sexual energy, if she is not there, she's not in the equation, or, you know, you're in a room, or like I'm in a hotel room on my own or whatever, then sexual arousal does not arise. It's not there. It doesn't come into the mind. It doesn't disturb the mind. There's no random arousal. There's no desire to reach for pornographic material. There is just a stillness of the mind that settles the sexual activity, meaning you naturally move into a state of celibacy, which becomes semen retention, right? Then what happens is when your partner or whatever is there and they want sex, then in the appropriate situation, then you start to become aroused, and then you will use up that energy, but you will discover that living in that state means that the majority of the time, if there's not a direct reason for you to be aroused, then you live in a state free from lust or free from desire, and that will start to regulate the essence. And that is the prerequisite. That's the prerequisite for semen retention from a spiritual or an energetic perspective, not some kind of forced attempt to do something for a crazy length of time. But at the same time, 28 days a month ain't going to do you any harm. Something you could do with developing some willpower. So I think all that's fine. People, what do I see online? No Nut November. That's the one, isn't it? One of the questions asked me about that. What do I think of No Nut November? It's a month. You know, like, who cares? They're talking about like it's, you know, some great strain. I think there's a sort of psychologist saying it's a danger. It's a month. You'll be fine. Come on. If you were doing that for a year, it's a little different. But, you know, to me, like, becoming celibate for 28 days doesn't count as being celibate, or retaining the semen for 28 days does. That's like giving up sugar for a month. Come on. It's no big deal. So, hopefully, maybe I made that more complicated. I don't know. I tried to keep it simple. There's a whole cycle of what happens with energy and essence and stuff to do with different types of arousal and all goes. It's very, very complicated. And I didn't really want to go into that because I have done that within, you know, for my students with a whiteboard in great detail, lots of diagrams and stuff. But for this podcast, I really just wanted to look at that question and the nature of semen retention and my views on it. So maybe there's nothing new in there for you, or maybe that doesn't, maybe that helps, maybe it doesn't, who knows. But that's my views on it.